Alright, my name is Eromosele. Poetry is something very, very unique. Poetry is an amazing art, and I think that people have different opinions of what poetry is. Different people think differently about poetry, but I think poetry is that tool that enhances advocacy. So for every great advocate that has existed on this planet, for every person who have fought for the cause of something, he has used poetry as a tool. You can't do advocacy and leave poetry out of it, because poetry even goes beyond the poems you see in books. Poetry goes beyond the spoken word videos you watch on YouTube, on Instagram or Facebook. Poetry is a soul of existence. Poetry presents itself like a spirit. It is a spirit of this new age, and poetry is something very, very important, and that's what I want us to understand, because poetry appeals to me as a very special advocacy tool. And in as much as some people could think poetry is an entertainment form, which it is, but to me, I have sentiment, and to me, I think that poetry transcends beyond that artistic tool, that artistic expression, that entertainment tool. For me, poetry basically is that art that advocates. Poetry is that art that speaks for. So irrespective of what you're speaking for, some persons could choose to advocate for nature, some persons could choose to advocate for the state, so people could choose they want to advocate for so many things. But then that major theme is that of advocacy. That's what poetry is all about. That's what I think poetry is all about. Poetry has made a whole lot of impact in the new world. So poetry is traceable as the oldest form of art. The books say that, and from time immemorial, poetry has always been important. So you can't talk about literature without talking about poetry. You want to talk about literature, you talk about Homer. Homer is a very powerful poet. You talk about William Shakespeare, you talk about Wordsworth, you talk about Blake. Those are very powerful writers. Those are persons who advocated for certain things at the time, and these people are very, very influential in the books of history. And even coming down to Nigeria, you realize that what Wole Soyinka achieved using poetry is that of advocacy. I read Abiku when I was younger, and I lately only realized that Abiku is not just some sort of poem. It's not just any kind of poem. There is a spirit of advocacy in Abiku, and that Soyinka's work has actually had a whole lot of influence on the status quo of Nigerian political system. So I think poetry that's very influential, and modern day poetry has actually taken a step forward. We have forms of poetry that has moved from the page. We have forms of poetry that have moved from just written forms to even spoken word. And the netizens, new poets, have taken advantage of the social media. And the social media is on its own is somewhere you can pull influence. It's very influential, and poetry using this paradigm has actually showed itself to be that strong voice that criticizes society, that it's like a stroke, when society is going the left wing. Poetry is that tool that is used to bring society back to its right course. So I think poetry is very influential, and the world can't do without poetry, in my opinion. Poetry is in everything. Yeah, this is a very important question. It's something very important. It appeals personally to me. So we know Nigeria's political system from inception has not been very smooth. It has not been very perfect, and the poet has a responsibility of talking for the masses. The poet is that person who puts his life on the line, advocating for society. People who don't have voice, the poet brings their voice to bear. The poet is an advocate, just as I said earlier. And you could want to talk about the corruption in the country. You could want to talk about election riggings. It is not the responsibility of the politician to talk about the corruption in politics. I think the rightful person that should do that is the poet, because the politician is corrupt. Then it is the responsibility of the poet to tell the politicians, you're corrupt. As a British philosopher I know would say, Lord Arton would say that absolute power corrupts absolutely. You see, power is something that is very overwhelming, and when you have power, you could tend to be carried away. Now, the poet is that figure that points fingers to the politicians, to those in power, telling them, reminding them that it is their responsibility to bring basic amenities to the society. And the poet is that person that criticizes the politician. The poet is that person that it's like a watchdog of the society. So when you're talking about Nigerian politics, you cannot undermine the place of poetry. You cannot undermine the voice of the poet in the society, because the poet is very important. There is no society that has attained the highest point of civilization that have not had a poetry figure who helped construct that society. I don't think there is. Look at Rome, look at ancient Greece, even look at America, the whole of poets that criticizes and brings back the society to its right course when the society goes the left way. Okay. So before now, it was page poetry. When I was growing up, I used to read poetry in books, and a whole lot of people who didn't understand poetry would complain that poetry was boring and poetry was not very interesting in art. But presently we have young netizens who have come up to really fancy out the arts of poetry. They've really added flair, and they've really made it a point of interest. And in the Nigerian climes, poetry is growing, it's still growing. And I am very happy, particularly that poetry even has a market. So I am very happy also that there are poets who are really in the front row of entertainment. So when you're talking about mainstream entertainment, when you're talking about the Wall Street Entertainment Journal these days, you can't leave out poetry. Like in my city, Uyo, for instance, there is no events these days. You hardly see an event that do not have a spoken word performance. This goes a long way to show that poetry is growing in this climb, that poetry has a whole lot of potential, poetry has a whole lot of content, which I think in the nearest future people will come to understand. Of course, it's a growing market, and People are buying into the idea of what poetry is. People are buying into the marketability of poetry. Already poetry is making its way into the advertising industry, and you can hardly see an advertising script that you don't see a drop of poetry in it. You hardly see advertising companies who don't work with these poets. So last 2 years we have seen Heritage Bank worked with the likes of Efe Paula Zino, the likes of Titi Lokwe Sonuga, the likes of Wanabong Udobang, and this is a plus to poetry. It goes along with the show that if given time, this art, this tool can be of gross importance to the markets, to even contributing to the country's GDP, and it shows that poetry is very important, an amazing art. It's World Poetry Day, and I am very happy, very happy to be around here. I'm very happy to celebrate poetry with the rest of the world, and considering what the world is facing now, the world is facing a very hard time, and my words to the rest of the world in these hard times is that we all should be strong. In this time we have this gross epidemic in our universe. I want to tell the rest of you guys out there that if we are in parts, if we are in that small atomic particle, if we are in that small atomic part, we will not be able to fight the coronavirus. The best thing we can do now is come together and be strong and hope and work hard and support each other, because we have been hit by worse things than this, and I am sure the world government is doing everything possible to come out with a vaccine for this virus. Nobody is happy this virus is here in a universe, and I want to say this importantly to countries that are really suffering this coronavirus. I want to say this to Europe especially, to China, to America, to the rest of Africa, to the rest of the world, that we are with you. We are strong together. We are very emotional about this, but that wouldn't mean we're not going to stand up to our feet and fight this virus. Together we can fight this virus. And it's International Poetry Day, and what I say is be strong. We are together, and together we will defeat this virus. And this was my Rockland House TV International Poetry Day talk time. Thank you.